What's up, amigos? Coming to Jaime here today. Today we're going to do a Zorga deck profile. So this is specifically for set 3. I know set 4 is coming around the corner, but I thought I'd show this off as a template moving into set 4. So I'm going to go over the winning image currently right now, some of the choices, and have some closing thoughts and wrap it up. So let's get right into it.
And also for Valentine's Day, they're doing the new playmat with the new angel feathers on there too. It's pretty cool with Gabrielle and some of the no-seal on there too. Definitely recommend it to special someone for you. And so if you want to check out their store, check out the affiliated link and use the Commander Jaime code to get a discount on your next purchase.
So coming from set 2 into set 3, one of the biggest things that Zorga got was really more of a mitigation boost. And so what I mean by that is that there were some discrepancies with Alchemagic in general, and it's partly because you have to have orders in hand in order to do it in the first place with orders already in the drop zone too. So one of the things that I really appreciate from this set 3 is this guy over here, Shadow Cloak. And Shadow Cloak is what really it is that when this unit is placed into a rearguard circle from hand, you can actually search your deck for an order, reveal it, and then you can send it to the drop zone if it didn't exist already there yet. So really what it does, it helps you optimize on the orders that you want to use and set up into the drop zone. So it helps with that graveyard aspect, making sure that you have orders in the drop. But not only that, it can be paired up with this card over here, is the grade 1. So this guy has an X skill, so when he's Counterblast 1, you can bind this unit, choose an order from a card from your drop, and now put it into your hand. And so as you can see, one sets up the drop, one sets up your hand in that sense. And you can also cycle between the two or just reverse the order, or just use with 2 different orders. So you have flexibility there, and helps you with your hand too in defense quality, because sometimes when you have too many orders in your hand, they are no shield value at all. So you're kind of screwed in that sense, and you can really lose a game in that sense. So, and at the same time, sometimes you just don't draw into your orders, which is really weird sometimes. And you have this card like Belle over here that essentially when it's placed onto a rearguard circle, she's actually from set 2. You may put all of your cards from your bind zone into your drop, and if you do, this unit gets plus 5k until the end of the turn for each of your card put. And so this helps cycle back these guys, the carrying processing, and any orders that you bounded due to Alchemagic in that sense. And this becomes a big beater, of course, too. And you can further use this guy to get more orders back into your hand, so you can keep consistently doing Alchemagic. You can use Zorga's Counterblast skill to revive it, and then use its Counterblast skill to get a holder back in that sense too. So these are the most impactful cards right now that helps with that consistency boost, being able to do Alchemagic and be able to do the thing that you want to do in the first place. So with everything going around it, it's really supporting that same winning image that you want to do Alchemagic for that appropriate scenario. So that way you can maximize that order benefit in sense. Now onto the right line. So for zeros, it could be anything that you want. I'm using the new Aquaforce Select starter, and it's an SP, so I'm very happy about this. I honestly didn't like the zombie one. It was just kind of gross, since it's just not a pleasant thing to look at the sense. But everything else upwards is really amazing with the Zorga line. So we have Rancor Chain over here. So when you place into Vanguard, you can Soul Blast, draw 2, and then discard an order. And if you did not, you discard 2. This helps you fetch, dig deeper into your deck, and of course set up those orders into the drop zone too. And it can be used as a rearguard too, so it could be that plus 2k, so it becomes a 10k booster or attacker. It depends if you want to use early game aggression or as a booster for the mid to late game, which is appreciated too. And then of course you have here the grade 2 Hush Dragon. When it's placed onto Vanguard Circle, you can get any orders which you would normally with this card with Rank Return back to your hand, so that way you're able to maximize and still not miss out on the orders that you have in hand. And then of course rearguard circle, it gets an additional 5k if you use an order this turn, so it becomes a 15k beater. Have an 8k booster, makes a 23k line, and then you have orders that make it to the 33 or even 38 mark in that sense too. It just makes numbers a lot easier, so you can use it in that fashion. Zorga, of course, like I mentioned, you can Counterblast 1, revive a card into the rearguard circle, which is really cool. It gives you flexibility, builds up the field, so that way you can set it up. And then of course it has the Alchemagic ability to be able to do 2 orders once per turn in that sense. So that's really what it does, and we're still pretty much the same right line as the prior sets moving into set 3, of course. Onto the remaining grade 3s and the order cards that you'll be using for this deck. So with Zorga, you want to maximize on copies. One of the things that you appreciate is being able to write consistently, 1 for soul reasons, 2 for persona to make help numbers bigger. This is still a 3 attack deck, so you want to make big columns as easy as possible, and that persona right is just big in that sense. With the order cards, there's a lot more flexibility now, since with Shadow Cloak, like I said, you're able to set it up in your drop zone from your deck, so it helps with kind of reducing the ratios that we normally try to maximize with, like such as like GDR here, grief, despair, and rejection. Of course, Spiritual Body Condensation or SBC, and we were able to reduce it down to 3 and 2 and make more room for different orders. And as you can see, so I'll start with the core of it, which is GDR and SBC. GDR is Counterblast 1, choose up to 3 units and give a plus 10k until the end of the turn, which is big because you still want to make big power columns. You reduce it to 3 because now you have Shadow Cloak to be able to just fetch it, and then you have Cherry on Processing to be able to reuse it if you need to. And of course Bell to be able to bind, return from the bind zone in that sense. So that's why you're able to reduce it to 3, but it's still an important card, so that's why we have it at 3, so we can still see it a lot more easier. And we have Spiritual Body Condensation because it's an important thing. It's usually paired up with Grief, Despair, and Rejection too, so it's still vital. And so you want to at least be playing 2, where it helps you Soul Blast 1 to revive a card from your drop zone into your Rigard Circle with the same grade or less as your Vanguard. So ideally you can do this on your grade 3 to revive anything. On your grade 2 turn, you can revive a handy booster such as Rancor Chain or another card and just be early aggression in that sense, so it's still valuable. You could also pair it up with different orders to have build up a field and then do other effects depending on the order. So one that pairs up where really good is over here, Cursed Souls. Cursed Souls is where you Soul Blast 2, check the top 4, and then of course if you did Alchemagic you can call 2, otherwise you call 1, and then you send the rest to the drop zone, and those units get plus 5k until the end of the turn. This is still helpful because sometimes you want to build a bigger field with just using Alchemagic, and that's why this card is still played at 1, plus you can search it. And also any revival other cards such as like this one and this one, you're able to tag this on in the drop zone, and then because of the these skills reviving other units, they'll get the additional plus 5k as well. But it has to be the one in the drop, while these has to be the ones in the hand. So just a quick tip on that, just a reminder, so you can get a benefit of, you know, plus 10k to that specific units that were brought by these other orders in the sense too. And moving to this transitioning, we have the 2 Nectars over here. Nectar is really nice because it doesn't use a Counterblast, it doesn't use a Soul Blast, so you're able to choose one of your rear guards, and until the end of the turn, it gets plus 5k for every 5 cards in your drop, and then if your drop has 15 or more cards, it gets an additional crit on top of that. So this gives you the crit pressure that you need in Zorga to be able to close out games sometimes, especially when you're in 4 damage. This helps you much more friendly, much more lethal at damage 4, and sometimes maybe damage 3, just depends on your drive checks, but it just helps with that, and it gives power at the same time. And again, it doesn't use a Counterblast or a Soul Blast, so it makes easier. At first I was tempted to do this at 1. I've seen lists that play 2 as well, and I first was like, can I reduce this to 1? And what I realized with the other orders, it's just 1 card just to have in hand, just in case it goes to the damage zone, or it's just a little easier just to fetch it or just mill it by another card in that sense. So having that 2 actually has worked out. Plus, again, since it has no cost associated with, you can really use it with any other order that you may have, pretty flexible. And it's just a useful card all around in your matchups too. And going over here to Registration, it took me a while to say that word, but anyway, you can Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, retire any of the player's rear guard, and then if you do, you can revive up to 2 cards with Alchemagic, of course, being in the main thing as well of that same grade. So if you retire a grade 2, you revive 2 grade 2s. If you retire a grade 1, you retire 2 grade 1s in that sense. Otherwise, if you didn't do this in Alchemagic, you just revive 1 in that sense too. And so it's big because it's your method of being able to retire rear guards on your opponent's side of the field. This gives you that aspect to remove pesky rear guards that are really annoying or just like diminish your resources in that sense if they do depend on that. So it helps with that card attrition fight that you're trying to have sometimes too. And it can be paired up with other cards such as, you know, the Cursed Souls or the Spiritual Body Condensation or even the Nectar to be able to build a board, have power up, and just be able to have that flexibility. So that's why we do play 1, because it doesn't always come up in every matchup or is necessary. You would rather do a different order such as like Spiritual Body Condensation or GDR or even Nectar in that case. So having the 1-off is nice. And then lastly, we have over here the Black Magic or Death Inviting Black Magic. And so this card is cool, and so it has an initial cost of Counterblast 4 to draw 2 cards. Now the Counterblast can be reduced depending on the cards that you have bounded, and so this counts for cards, not orders, so just be mindful of that. So if you bind the grade 1, it counts it too, so you're able to reduce the cost with that sense. It may not come up as often, at least with my play testing, but certain matchups you need to build a certain hand. It kind of helps with that while you're still doing a different order to help benefit your turn too. So if you need to revive a field, you have the revival cards while still drawing 2 more cards to build up some hand attrition in that sense. So it's still kind of nice to have in that flexibility. If you don't like the card, you can change it out for a different order or even increase the ratios for another one that you like better. Now onto the rest of the deck with the normal units. So we have the grade 2 Shadow Cloak over here. We are playing 3. You can get away with 4 too, but again, it's that consistency of sending orders from your deck to your drop. That second skill is also really nice. So when you play an order, you can Soul Blast 1 and this unit gets plus 5k until the end of the turn. And then if it was through Alchemagic, you can actually bounce one of your other rear guards back to hand. So this gives you kind of like a Ghost Chase feel in that sense too. So you're able to use Zorga to revive cards like an Overtrigger or a Perfect Guard and be able to bounce it back with his skill. Not only that, it gets the power, so it's another 15k beater outside of Husk Dragon, and if you did play the Shark, for example, it's a different beater in that sense, just to help with like some pressure in that sense too. But mostly it's really for the consistency reason of the first skill. And then of course we have over here with Hendrina. Hendrina is still a great card and I feel it's still necessary. You can either play 3 to 4, it just depends on what you're trying to fit in. As you can see, I only was able to fit 3, and so what it does is that when it's placed onto rearguard circle, you can mill up to 3 cards from your deck, which helps build up that drop zone. What I realized too is that as soon as you can get to Nectar live, you have more flexibility and you have more pressure in that mid to late game too with Nectar. So Hendrina is still valuable, and you may be able to revive it with Zorga multiple times just to get more mills, and of course being able to use its second skill. And the second skill is where it can retire itself from rearguard, and then the next time you would do Alchemagic, all the Soul Blast costs are pretty much paid for this. So if you were to say Alchemagic and you need to Soul Blast 3 total, that becomes 0, which is super nice, right? So you don't have to worry about the soul being a thing in that sense too. And so try to play 3 or 4. It's really in that ratio what you can fit into. Now moving into the grade 1s, like I said, we have Cherry and Processing over here, and so we're playing 2. This is a card that we ideally want to see rather in the late to mid game, because early on we're still trying to get set up, and more than likely we still have an order in our hand. So it's not necessarily right away, but we do want to make sure that we see it around that time. So 2 seems to be a perfect number. Again, Counterblast, grab an order from the drop, and then of course this gets bounded, so it helps with Bell later on too. And then Bell again is the one that returns all your buying cards and it gets plus 5k, so it helps recycle that too. And with the rest of the grade 1s over here, we have PGs. PGs are still useful. You want to make sure you can guard, and then of course if you have 1 card or less, you don't have to discard, which is valuable. So still mandatory with this kind of PG. And then of course the grade 1 over here is Rogue Headhunter. Headhunter is still valuable because it serves like Hendrina, because the next time you would pay an cost for an Alchemagic, you could reduce it by Counterblast 1, and you can do that and stack them. So if you have 2, then you can pay less 2 Counterblasts in total. So if you have a card like GDR and Registration, man, I'm still struggling with that word. That's a total of Counterblast 2 and Soul Blast 1 net. So if you use Hendrina and 2 Rogue Headhunters, that's free at that point. So you do the math in that sense. And then of course it gets an additional plus 5k if you did play an order this turn, which is actually really nice because it comes as a 13k booster or 13k beater. And it's just sometimes nice to have that card if you don't have the other beaters, such as like a Shadow Cloak or Husk Dragon ready to go. And honestly, it's just a really nice booster too to help push bigger numbers in that sense. So you don't have to rely always on GDR to make decent numbers in that sense. Onto the triggers of the deck. And so we are playing 4 heals because we do need to heal. We are playing 8 crit for pressure. You can play the new one, the Alana. This is basically able to, at the end of the battle, go into soul, choose one of your rearguards, or actually one of your units, and it gets plus 2k. So you can try to make some numbers. I find out, 13k is really that magic number that you're trying to hit. So if you give it to like a 10k grade 2, it doesn't make that number. So just be careful with the numbers. But really it is there for that soul resource in case you don't have Hendrina. So it helps with that regard for like the following turn for Alchemagic in that sense too. And then we play front triggers because we do want to have pressure, but we play these other front triggers that get the shield power, so you have 20k shield in that sense because we do need some shield value in that sense. And then of course, shout out to Duke for giving me this SP over trigger for Stoicheia. This is the blessed favor, so you get to heal, front trigger, crit, and then of course draw. So it's just a good all-around trigger in that sense, so it almost feels like you're playing 9 crit. And with Zorga, you definitely want to maximize on the crit potential of it, so that way you're able to close games at 3 to 4 or 5 damage pretty easily with that pressure too. And then of course with the synergy of the front triggers, you're able to attack with the Vanguard first and get a chance to be able to have a front-like effect with these 4 triggers in total. So that way your units that are still waiting to attack are even bigger and harder to guard in that sense. On some so useful key plays, so with like set 3, just like I said, the Shadow Cloak helps you bounce with cards that you may need or send to the drop zone in that sense. And so a combo that you can do, especially in the mid to late game, is that once you've binded enough cards with either Chariot Processing or just using Alchemagic in general, you can have Bell return that to get like maybe 15k or 20k power, and then you have these guys being 13k boosters, and of course Shadow Cloak just being there to get an additional 5k. So a cool combo that you want to do is GDR with Nectar. So one, GDR is going to give 10k to the front row in that sense, and then Nectar is going to give plus 15k and a crit to an additional card. And so since Bell kind of gets that extra power, you can give it to Shadow Cloak if you want to. It just depends on the numbers that you're going to do in that sense, and that makes more sense. And so let's say your opponent's at 4. If you can attack with your Vanguard first, there's a chance of you getting a crit, so more than likely they'll do a PG or something to make it basically harder to make it a no pass in that sense. And so if you so happen to have a crit Druv check, then you can put it on here and distribute the power that it makes sense the most. And so this is definitely swinging at least 13 plus 7 plus any of the binded cards, and then plus any of the triggers. That can make a decent number. And then if this has another crit pressure as well, thanks to Nectar, it's an additional 15k. And then if you bounce the skill using the, not bounce the skill, but if you use its skill to Soul Blast to get another 5k, it's even bigger in that sense. So this is one of those key plays that you can use. There is no like right away wrong doing it, but it's just one of those things that I wanted to point out. And that's the deck profile, amigos, and not much has changed except for those little issues that we feel that set 3 has mitigated with Zorga. It still kind of struggles in the sense to be one of the top decks, but it's still a deck that you can enjoy and as well have that granblue aesthetic. I actually refer this deck as like spellbook granblue in a sense. If you are from Yu-Gi-Oh at all too as well, you get the reference too. And so just helping that mitigation just makes this deck a little more consistent, a lot more enjoyable too, so you don't break in that sense too. And set 4 may have some cards that help out, but I feel like the biggest boost is Magnolia, especially since the original Rylines are getting the grade 4 versions of those. I feel like those decks are still gonna have more of that power boost benefit, so I'm gonna see if I can tinker around with Zorga in set 4 still, but more than likely Magnolia is really the winner in Stoicheia at this point, unless I'm proven wrong in this sense. So if you feel like if you want to share some suggestions or ideas with Zorga moving forward to set 4, I definitely would be open to it and appreciative of that too as well. And so you can also look into different videos or pics of different Zorga deck profiles that I'll link in the description too. So shout out to, I believe, Jose from Facebook too as well. I know he had a list that was pretty consistent. I feel like some of this list isn't too much different for most players around the world too. It's just gotten to the point of depending on what kind of orders are you playing, what are you prioritizing, and of course your local metagame in that sense. So this is my deck profile for set 3, and I'm looking forward to set 4 with Stoicheia, and then of course some other of the nations as well. So till the next time videos, leave a like, share with an amigo, and subscribe.